Hi there. So this is a video demonstration about how to do a few things in Excel. Now, a lot of you might be coming in with a decent amount of experience using Excel. Some of you might not. I just want to make sure that everybody is sort of on the same page with how we can use Excel in order to create some relatively straightforward graphs and images. And from there, we can take those images and edit them further. Um, Other programs can be used in order to derive graphs. These are usually statistics programs like SPSS, SAS, or things like that we won't really focus on here for now. But if you want to be able to make graphs, you can use things like Excel. Now, this demonstration will focus on Excel. You can use a free alternative if your computer does not have Excel, being OpenOffice's Calc program. It's its own spreadsheet program. I recommend these two things and not so much Google Sheets, because Google Sheets, although it's easier to use, it actually has less functionality in a few ways that I may have noted in my documentation. So again, if you want to be able to do all the things that we're going to do today, I do recommend you download one of those two programs, being Excel or OpenOffice's Calc. Links are in the document. All right, so we have three examples to go over here in the Excel. We have a first example just to get a simple bar graph. Now you might be thinking, oh, well, I just plug and chug the numbers and it's pretty much good to go. We're going to be spending a decent amount of time, though, editing the actual output graph. We're not going to just take it as is. So let's first try to get that graph. Now, if you are new to this, there are some commands you should take note of. For instance, if you're trying to figure out what the average is across several data points, you type in something like equals, and this will tell the Excel program to look out for a formula rather than just random text or numbers. Equals average, and then open parenthesis. And then you could just put in the cells that you want to find the average of. So you can type those in manually, but you can also select them by doing a drag select. So we want to figure out what the average is for a control group in this case, and we'll drag and select these cells here. And if we hit enter, it actually slaps a parenthesis on the end and gives us the average estimate. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. I will show you other formulas in a bit, but what are the data we're actually looking at? Well, for this example, I'm using some data that came from a recent project of mine. And in this project, we have rodents. And mind you, rodents are a good model in order to understand some very basic neuroscience of behavior. So in this study, I wanted to see what happens when we use laser to activate certain brain regions involved in hunger. And in order to assess how this works in live animal experiments, they received laser light that was being sent through a tiny fiber optic cable that went into their brains. And while they received laser, or didn't receive laser, they were given an hour to eat M&Ms. Now, rats do eat a decent amount of M&Ms, but we wanted to see if this eating was enhanced to more than it normally was at baseline. So we could look at numbers, we could figure out averages, but we also might benefit from trying to demonstrate this visually to any sort of audience that we want to convey this data or findings to. So let's continue on with this. The chart that I have here is a list of the subjects. So this is one subject called 9605, another subject 9606. We don't really care about the subject names. They're just here for us for labeling purposes. Then we have the amount of M&Ms eaten in grams, mass weight, in this control column here. And then we have the amount those same rats ate when on a different day they were given the laser treatment instead. So control group got no laser, but everything else was the same in their testing box. The treatment group got laser, and that was the only difference in their testing box. And as we know, we want to figure out what the average is. So in order to figure out what the average is for the laser condition now, we would do something very similar where we would put in equals average, and instead of selecting these group of cells, we would select these ones. But there is a shortcut that we could do. Excel kind of takes account of how things shift relatively. So if I go over here to this bottom corner, you see sort of a little bit of a green square, very tiny green square, and the cursor changes to a different plus shape. What we can do is we can expand that plus, and it copies the same formula while shifting everything over by 1. What do I mean by this? Well, if we look at the formula, it says here, it says C8 colon C14 for this guy. We look at this cell and it says D8 colon D14. So it's actually looking at the cells that are 1 to the right of that. And so what I mean by shifting over is that when you figure out the average for this, and then you say, okay, use the same formula over here, Excel automatically changes formula so it's to the data for 1 shifted over to the right of that. And that's why it changes from C to D. If you didn't want something to change, though, when you try to copy formula, you can imagine that if I copy this formula anywhere, let's say I hit Control C, I'm on a PC, by the way. Mac users might need to use something like Command C in order to do this. So Control C copies. We see it does a little rectangular selection. If I go ahead and just copy and paste it here on PC, that's Control V now, we see that it's kind of all screwed up. It says dividing by 0. What does that mean? It means that we're trying to divide we're trying to figure out the average of no data or 0 data. So we can't really do that mathematically. And the problem is that it's looking at cells F12 through F18. So it's looking at these because we shifted from this location over to here, we shifted over 2 columns, and then we shifted down a bunch of rows. So now it's looking at the same relative difference in the data that it was supposed to be trying to assess. So this isn't very helpful, and this is a problem that you'll probably run into when you just try to copy paste stuff around. So in order to keep formulas from changing on you, if you don't want them to do that, let's say you want to keep the column the same, and then the only thing that can change is a row. You can actually stick a $sign in front of that. And so when I do something like this, we stick a $sign there, we stick a $sign in front of the other D, hit enter to update it. This doesn't change, but if we hit Control C, Control V to copy paste, we see that the formula again doesn't change. So that only works for the column. Let's say we slap this into the same cell down here, it still kind of screws up again because now it's looking at 12 through 18 instead of 8 through 14. So let's try this again. We're going to go back here and we're going to put $signs in front of the number now, saying don't change this thing right after the $sign, even if we shift the cells over. So now I'm going to hit Control C and just plop it somewhere else, like over here. The number actually comes out the same because it's using the exact same formula instead of changing it based on you moving stuff around. All right, let's get rid of all this stuff, though. We don't care about that. Now, this will help us get a bar graph, but we need some sort of measure of variability. And so let me take a brief moment to explain what I mean by that. Measures of variability in stats just tell us how much the data vary widely or narrowly. So if we have a group of subjects where they do some sort of task and they all perform around the same result, then there isn't that much variability in the data. If instead you have some task and people get wildly different results, then there's a lot of variability in the data. We could think of it kind of like, let's talk about chemistry class, which admittedly is not a student favorite in some circles. And so the grade ranges for chemistry might vary widely, where some people get A's, some people get B's, some people get C's, and so on and so forth. And so there might be a lot of variability in that data. Let's contrast that with some sort of class that should be a credit or no credit class because it's really easy, but for some reason people can take it for a letter grade. Well, by the end of the semester, everybody ends up getting A's, like somewhere between 90 versus 97%. And there's not much variability in that data. Everybody's basically getting something in the A range. So we can use certain formulas to give us a number for how variable stuff is. You might have heard of one of these things called standard deviation. And although standard deviation is all right, I prefer this thing called standard error, or the lengthier term for it is standard error of the mean. Is another way of showing variability, and it kind of adjusts it based on the number of subjects as well. And I'll demonstrate why we go for SEM, standard error of the mean, in a little bit. But again, this is just a number that's going to give us how much things vary. I put a little note down here saying SEM is standard deviation divided by the square root of the number of subjects. Type in this thingamajig right here. So we'll go ahead and click on this. We don't want to copy the whole thing here. What we can do is just click and select the text only, the formula. We're going to hit Control-C to copy it. We're going to click over here, and then we're going to go into the text entry box and click Control-V. Now, saying cells, it's not going to know what that means. You actually have to provide the cells that you're interested in. So we'll select again these ones right here, because we want to figure out how much the data here varies. We see it kind of hiccuped there. Didn't really like that. So we might actually have to do this manually. Let's try that. Okay, we're good there. And then, so first part of this is standard deviation. As I said down here, standard deviation divided by the square root of the number of subjects. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 subjects. So SQRT is for square root. We'll just replace subject with 7. And that gives us the standard error number for the control group, or the control treatment here. And as before, we can just kind of drag this over here and pop it in. Another thing you can do is you could hit Control-C, Control-V to just copy it over. So either way, you could click and drag it if you're doing a whole bunch of things that are using the same formula and just advancing over by one column each. Or you could just do copy paste. So now we got our numbers, and these numbers will help us make our graph. How do we make the graph? Well, we have to. I suggest first selecting the data that you're interested in using. The parts to select do matter to some degree. You want to, at a minimum, select the data that you're going to use. We don't select the SEMs first. We don't select those because those aren't going to be part of the base chart. We want to first put in the bars before we put in these like little T-whisker things that you'll see in a bit. So we'll definitely select these two average numbers. And I do think it's helpful to select also the titles here as well. We're going to omit this averages thing here. We'll change some lettering later. So we just have these 4 cells selected. We'll go to Insert. And then there should be an option, depending on your version or program, to insert a 2D bar or column chart. And so we got this big thing over here. I'm going to say Insert Chart here. So I'm going to migrate it a little bit off to the side. Now, it's a good start, but it's kind of bare bones. And there are a lot of things we could do to make this chart look better. Some people might think, oh, it's done. But really, I argue that it's not, because it could actually have a lot more information conveyed a lot more clearly. For instance, chart title, super vague, not helpful. We want to change that to something more informative, like laser effect on food intake, or even, we'll just say M&M intake. All right. We're also noticing that there's some extra info missing. We should add some axis titles. So when we have our whole graph selected, you should have an option to add chart elements. These include titles and other little legends and things like that, and also the error bars, which we'll put on in a little bit. In the meantime, though, we'll have a primary horizontal thing. If you look down to the bottom of the chart, you'll see it pop in. So we'll select that. We also want something for the primary vertical axis, the y-axis here. You can see that pop in right there. Alrighty. So we're getting started now. What do we call these numbers over here? Well, I mentioned that they're M&Ms eaten, so we'll just say that this is an average number. You don't want to just say M&Ms eaten because we don't know whether that's a raw data or average data. So we say average M&Ms eaten. And it's good practice and good etiquette to put in the units, usually in parentheses. Abbreviations can be used like AVG for average and G for grams. That's a taste thing. It's up to you. All right, we click on this, and this is just treatment. All right, so we're getting started. We're getting there. We want to adjust some more cosmetic things. These zeros, if you think about it, these zeros are not really telling us much. They're kind of useless. So let's double click on this y-axis stuff, and you'll see something pop up here. You'll get some sort of option thing. Make sure you select the y-axis again. It says axis options. If we have it where it's fill in a bucket and a line, it allows you to change how it looks physically. We want to change something with the numbers though. So we're going to go to this bar thing here. Go down to number. It says decimal places. We don't need decimal places. Okay, so that gets rid of all the extra zeros. It also might not be helpful to have it counting off every single one. There's just a lot of numbers to look at here. So what I usually do is when we go to labels, axis options here, gives us units. We're going to ignore the minor one. That's not something that's really being indicated here. We're going to change this 1 to 2. Now watch what happens in the y-axis when I hit enter. We get rid of all the odd numbers, so only the even numbers are set here because it goes by every 2. Alrighty, so now we're good as far as the text that exists here, but we want to do something better. We want to make the text more readable because the bars are huge. Text is kind of tiny. It's not really that helpful. So what we can do is we could go back to the home tab here. And firstly, I don't know why Excel does this. It kind of automatically puts it in a gray color. We're going to just change all the text to black. So I'm just going to click each thing where there's text. Change it to black to make it pop a lot better. You could also do a quick change on sizes. So you could either do this by selecting it and on the Home tab, just upping the font sizes or changing the number of the font size. Or I believe you might be able to edit font a little bit more of a round way here. I'll just do it the simple way for now. I'm going to make it 12. I'm going to make it bold for a title. I'm going to make this 12. I'm going to keep that not bold. Same here, 12, not bold, 12, bold. A problem that I see when people make posters is that they have this bad habit of having text be too small and the pictures being too small. You want to, as most as you can, maximize the imagery and decrease text when it comes to any sort of visual representation, whether that's posters or other stuff. Alrighty. Quick explanation of what I've done here. This is another one of these things where it's a taste-based thing. You don't have to do it, but I'm doing it here. I'm getting rid of the extra space to kind of keep things in line. And then when I hit enter, it just puts the next line down here. So it feels like it's stretching across the less area here and instead kind of puts it more compactly in this one spot. If I move it around, it automatically shoves the y-axis over. If it doesn't for some reason do that, you can do that manually by clicking on the inner part of the chart here and then just sort of squishing this part around. All right, so things are looking good, but we still need error bars to show how much the data vary. So you could look at a number and say, oh, well, this is how much the data seem to vary. This is how much the data seem to vary in this other group. But really, it helps to actually have these error bar things on a column graph, like what we have here. So these error bars, what we're going to do is we're going to put them in. And when we have a simple bar graph, we can do that relatively easily. So we click on the whole graph somewhere in the background area. We go back to the formatting for the graph, the design tab here. Add chart element, error bars. Now we get options and you see, oh, standard error. And you might have a compulsion to just click that. The default values of standard error that it gives are not going to be correct. They're not going to match. You could even see, looking at the bars, that the two T whisker things that pop up over here, they look practically identical, and they really shouldn't be. So it kind of tells you that maybe something's amiss with how it's getting this number. And these default values aren't really helpful, like standard error, standard deviation. Look at the standard deviation bar. They're like equal levels, and they're not matching up with the columns anymore. So we got to fix that. We're going to go into more error bar options. It's going to pull up this thing on the right here. And we're going to select this bar option thing here. We see vertical error bar direction. We want it to go both ways so we can see up and down how much variability there is. The cap just detects whether it's a T shape or whether it's just a line. I prefer T shape. We definitely don't want fixed value. We don't want any of these because they're random calculations that we don't know how Excel's arriving at them. So instead, we're going to go custom and then hit specify value. So it gives us these sort of filler things here. I'm going to hit delete, and you can actually scroll the window behind it while keeping this thing up. We want to select both of these cells like we did for creating the bar chart in the first place. So we're going to select both of these. This determines the upper portion of the bar going above, the upper portion of this T whisker thing going above the bar. Then we go over here, delete this, and then we do the exact same thing. Click, drag, select both of those. Hit OK, and then the error bars update slightly. Although it doesn't look like there's a huge difference, there is somewhat of one. Now, that said, some of the elements on here are a little bit faint. Some of them are still not necessary. These are some extra little gussying up type options that I recommend. First, we've got to fix another thing with the y-axis. So we want to have a line there, solid line. Let's make it stark and black. We also want to maybe add some tick marks sticking out, pointing at the numbers. So we're going to go over here to the bar option, click tick marks, and then put outside. And then these little things pop up here. And then we do something similar with the x-axis, where we say, oh, put a line in there. It would look nicer. Make sure it is something solid colored. And then tick marks are kind of weird for the x-axis. Watch what happens when I put in one for the major type. It just puts it over here in empty space. Not something I find very helpful. So instead, I like to do minor type, and then hit outside, and it actually points at the lettering. All right, the bars, they don't have to be the same color. It might be helpful if they're not actually. So if you click on one bar, you sort of don't double click it, but you sort of, let's say you're clicking onto the bars, it'll select both. And you click on one of the bars again, and then it selects just that one. You can change the coloring of it. You can either do it in this window with the bucket thing, fill and border, or you could do it by right-clicking on that. You get the fill option. I'm going to just choose gray because control group, nothing really is going on experimentally. An outline, we could actually kind of put a stark surround to the bar as well. And we can make that surround, this sort of black outline, a little bit more visible. When we click at outline again, we have weight, and that just increases the solidness of that bar, the thickness. You can see that black outline a lot better now. And we'll just do the same thing here. I'm going to keep the blue color for this one. So we're going to just change the outline. Got to select black manually. Got to change the weight of it to 1, and it pops out. You'll probably notice that the T whisker bars are not super visible. So maybe we should make them a little better. So we're going to make sure they're black rather than some shade of gray. And we're going to make them pop out a little bit more. That's better. All right. And the last adjustment I sometimes make is I ditch these vertical value guidelines or grid lines. Some people keep them in. I think that is kind of excess, so we're just going to toss them out so we have a very clean looking graph. Now, I was testing this stuff earlier in order to make sure everything was working out, and so I created images that are what you should be trying to attain doing this whole process. So you have a blank Excel file that you'll be working with. And you'll have to kind of follow these directions alongside what I'm doing here in order to attain this final product as we see here. Let's compare these two things together. One moment. So I'm going to close that real quick. I'm going to scroll this over, give it a little bit more space to view. And then in my folder, let's pull out the simple bar graph example and do a side-by-side comparison. So we're going to just zoom that in a little bit. It's a little bit grained out because I copied it to a Paint program. But when we compare them side by side, we see that they're relatively similar. So let's just kind of scrunch that over a wee bit more if possible. Yeah. So we see that we get the same rough product with some minor differences in labeling here. So that's good. This would be something good to put on a poster or a PowerPoint presentation, maybe even certain publications. And this is kind of what we want to attain when we're trying to make these figures, because we don't want to just have them being whatever the program spits out. We want it to be better than that. Excuse me. Alrighty. Hold on a second. Share screen. Of course, while I'm recording. Okay. All right. So that's the first part. And now having some of that information, we can make more complicated stuff, right? So let's take a look and see what we got here. We go from this tab here, making our simple bar graph, and I'd like you to follow along to make a more complex bar graph. For an example, I actually took the result of these data and it led up to a publication. This is from my grad work, and this is actually pulled from the article itself that was in print. You might not have something that looks identical to this. There are many more groups in this graph, as I mentioned here, but the general gist of it is what we're going to try to match up with. And so what is going on in this complicated mess of data? Well, I have a description here, but the short of it is that my grad work involved trying to elicit eating through one brain region and trying to halt eating through another brain region. And so these things separately had been studied, but not together in the same rat. And so again, we're talking rats here. Instead of laser, we're injecting drugs. The same drug in different regions will actually cause opposite effects. So one of these regions is called the accumbens. We'll talk about that later in class. We have it called ACB for short. And another one is called the lateral hypothalamus, LH for short. And so we have these conditions where we have drug or control going into the accumbens, and then drug or control going into the LH. So that makes for 4 different treatment groups, because we have 1, 2 for the accumbens, control and treatment, and then 1, 2 for the LH. 2 times 2 equals 4 possible groupings. It wasn't also as simple as just monitoring food intake over 1 hour. We actually checked the amount of food eaten by the 30-minute mark, by the 1-hour mark, by the 2-hour mark, and by the 4-hour mark to see how long the drug effects lasted. And so that's what we see here in some of the table. So when we have the intent to make this all into a bar graph, the bar graph is going to be pretty complicated. So we have 4 treatment groups times 4 different time assessment points. And that means that if we look at all these possible different conditions, it adds up to 16 total bars in our final graph. So let's make it. All right. So we have the raw data over here. We're at the first type of group here. We have, again, subject labels. And in each of these boxes down here is the amount of food eaten in grams at that point in time. It's cumulative, so at the 4-hour mark, this includes however much was eaten in the prior hours up until that point. All right, so we have some data already put in like mean format here. And as I've mentioned before, we can kind of do a little bit of a copy paste thing. So let's go ahead and try that out. Remember, we're going to use dollar signs, and we're going to use the same column and same cells to make sure that it sticks with the right formula. So we're going to do that. And we're going to do the same thing for the standard error thing here. So I'm going to do that here. Going to put more in there. And that should do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy first this mean/average. We're going to plop it up here. Okay. And now that that's in there, what I'm going to do for simplicity is actually get rid of the dollar sign here. Because then what I can do is, okay, we get rid of the dollar signs in front of the letters, hit enter to make it update. So still the same number, but then we can click and drag, and what'll update is, again, the columns. So we get D, E, and F corresponding to this being the D column, E column, and F column. So quick little fixes there. And we could do something similar with other data down here. You can see that it calculated all the means for you, so you don't have to punch in the data. You just need to kind of punch in the right sort of formulas so you can copy these over quick and easy. We also have a table for standard error of the means. So we're going to go ahead and plop this formula up over here as well. Then get rid of those dollar signs in front of the C's, hit enter. And then click, drag, pull it over here, and we are good there as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue to do that with these other parts real quick here. Bam, bam. And then put some more dollar signs in here because money. Right. Let's see. Control V. Get rid of those dollar signs in front of C's specifically. Hit enter. Drag it over. Okay. And we get the standard error stuff. Plop that up here, do the same sort of thing. Get rid of those extra dollar signs so that now we can do the shortcut. Drag this over so it autofills stuff. And once again, over with these other groups down here. Bam, bam, and then bam, 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 bam. Okay, C, Control V, and I'll address that in a second. C, Control V. Once more. Copy both. And there. And then again, just adjust that and that. Click, drag, done. Just this, click, drag, done. Same thing, bam, and bam. So you might be looking at this thinking, gosh, these numbers are really long to look at. They don't need to be. So what we can do is we can select all these numbers and change the format. You'll notice up here, it says increase decimal. We want to decrease decrease that. There's no reason to be looking at these long decimal places, so I'm just going to shrink this down to like here, pretty much. And then we're going to do the same thing also over here. This makes it a little bit more readable. Alrighty. So now we have the elements required to make our complicated chart. Let's go ahead and take a stab at it. So I'm going to select from here throughout here, and that way we have all the treatment group names and all the time points and nothing else but the data. And then we do the same thing of insert, and we'll choose a column chart, and it'll automatically pull something up here. And so far, this is already a good start. It's not a mess because we're getting the average data rather than like individual data. So that's good. And we already know from the last time what we want to fix up. So we're going to change the title real quick, saying, I'm just going to call it two-site drug effects on food intake, because that's basically what it is. We're going to add some titles real quick, as we did before. Bam, done. So this is average and cumulative, because it continues accumulating up to the 4-hour mark. Food intake. And just because things are a little cluttered here, I'm just going to go back up in front of the F and then hit enter to shove it all down. Then click somewhere else. Turn this into just time since injection, because that's what that is. And we're going to make all the text just better. So let's go ahead and do that. 12, 12, and bold, 12 bold, 12, and this legend's kind of tiny too, so we're going to bump that up. All right, and then everything's kind of like, for some reason, in a grayish color, so let's see if we can't do a quick change on all that. It did change it all to black, but it kind of screwed up the font sizing, so we're just going to quickly boost that up again. Bam, 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 and done. All right, so again, like I said, this is a good start. We have things color-coded to their treatment groups, so that's good. Now, we still need the error bars. And although we could just start popping those in, we still have a few more adjustments. So I'm going to just change this to not have decimal places again. So 0, because we don't really need that. And it's already going with every 2 grams, so we don't need to really change that. There aren't too many numbers there. We can add some tick marks. So major type outside, done. Over here, we're going to say minor type outside. Done. Is this behaving? Marks. Interesting. It does not seem to be doing anything. I think there's no line here, so it's not addressing it. Set black. Make sure that the line for the x-axis is black here, the fill bucket option. Try this again. Outside, and there they are, little tick marks. Okay. And then we could just get rid of the grid lines because I don't really like them. I'm just hitting delete after I select them, so they just pop out. So this seems like it's kind of good. And my tone of voice is kind of implying that maybe something's amiss. So certainly we could do stuff to the bars, but let's look at how the data compare between these 2 examples. Take a look at the x-axis first. Notice how there is a difference between the x-axis and legend between these two these two graphs. For instance, we see up here hours post-injection, but that's on our x-axis here. Meanwhile, the legend here are the different treatment groups, but that's on the x-axis over here. How do we do a switcheroo on these if we want to make these more consistent with each other? Well, let's say that perhaps we weren't interested in having all these control groups grouped together, all these treatment groups grouped together in the same time period. Let's say we wanted to see how each treatment group changed over time in a block, like how these are arranged. We need to tell Excel to switch the data. And this is part of the reason why I didn't do the error bars first, because we're going to have to put them in manually for each of these different treatment groups. So we go to select data after a right click on the chart anywhere, really. And it gives you the option to switch row and column. Let's do it. So it doesn't do that to any of the table that you got this data originally from, but it does do that here, where now the legend is the time, like this one is, and the x-axis is this stuff here. So what we can do is we can move the legend up to here, and we could kind of squish it around to give it a different shape to make it fit better. And this whole thing, we can actually expand down to the bottom of the window, like so. Okay, so far so good. We'll have to make some minor adjustments here. Move this down slightly. Let's add our bars. So when we click on this series, we can go up to Design, Add Chart Element Error Bars, similar to last time. But again, it just adds it only by each treatment group. You can't add them all at the same time doing the drag select, at least not in my version of the program. So you just have to punch them in by clicking on each colored bar type, specify value. We'll delete this, and you can kind of scroll up in the background here to the correct thing. Now, keep in mind, we're not selecting it across, we're selecting it down, because the blue bar is for all the 30-minute time points for all the treatment groups. So we'd select these like so. Then we select this whole thing, delete that, make sure there's nothing in there. And we do the same thing. We get T-whiskers that are going up and down the appropriate amounts here. You can see that these T-whiskers are a little bit large, but that's fine. All right. We'll do the same thing now with the other bars, and we'll pick it up from there. So error bar, insert, special value, scroll back up, select these, delete this, select these again, good. Gray bar, same thing. Specify 2-hour mark, 2-hour mark. Oop. Oh. So make sure we delete all that extra stuff. It kind of picked the wrong things here. Click again. Okay. All right. Then once more. Specify value. Move this over, and we're going to say this one, delete this, and this one. Okay. So now we have error bars. What else can we do to make these graphs similar to each other? Well, one thing we can do is we can change the color and make the bars a lot more eye-popping. So let's go ahead and do that. We know that from before, we changed the bars to have a different outline. So we'll go ahead and change the outline to solid line, make sure it is black. And we could change the fill to kind of be like a gradient of color going from white to dark gray. So the earlier time points should be more whitish color, and the later time point should be a darker color. So we'll make sure to click on the bar rather than the T-whisker for now. We'll do something a little bit more gray, and the line color should be black. And you could update the weight of the line, the width of it, as you like. It's up to you. Kind of makes it pop out a little bit better. Black. And this gray is probably already good to go, so we'll stick with that. And then this one. And we'll change the color from this kind of weird orange to something that's like maybe super dark. Yeah, this seems to contrast well enough. Now we get something that's kind of looking like our graph here. And the T-whiskers, make them a little thicker, make sure that they're more black colored to make them pop out. I think we actually need to do that for each of them. So unfortunately, let's just do that real quick. Bam, bam, bam. Okay. So far, so good. This is looking all right. Now, we're not going to add these extra little statistics things, but you might notice that our legend doesn't really have any text telling us what it is. It just says 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hours. Well, what does that really mean? They're times, but what do the times mean? Well, that's what this should be down here. Notice how the x-axis title didn't shift or update anywhere? We have to change this because this is no longer time since injection down here. This is now treatment. All right. You can't really add a legend title in here. At least I haven't really found a clear way to do that quickly. If anybody knows, feel free to cue me in on that. You can find a workaround to not only add text above a legend, but you can also add text in order to put in little significance markers elsewhere on the graph. For instance, these 2 asterisks, they usually mean something like, oh, this group is definitely different according to statistics compared to another group. And I would assume that based on the double asterisks here, this specific group has a much higher bar than, let's say, this other control group down here. And so these were all entered by text manually. Sounds annoying, but it kind of allows you a lot more control to do it. So let's go ahead and do that. When we go to insert, we scroll over and look for something like text or text box here. Now we can just draw that in right here, right above. We'll just put time since injection. Alrighty. And we could also change the format to be more like center aligned here, just to make it look a little cleaner. Stretch it out. And then we'll take our legend and move it around here. You might notice that the legend isn't crammed underneath the x-axis. I try to prioritize some of the empty space that can exist within the chart, and that's why it's important to just shove a legend into that empty space rather than squishing the whole chart narrower like this, then putting a legend down here. That's not really as helpful, you'll find. All right, and so now I would say that this looks pretty similar or similar enough to what ended up in my publication without, of course, adding more detail into it. In order to change, if you ever had to, the x-axis titles, by the way, you can't do these manually. You actually have to go back to their original thing here. So if I were to change this to something that says, let's say, full control group, very ominous sounding title. If we go back, it was changed over here. You can do the same for each of those. But again, you can't just double click and change the text on these specifically. You can with a lot of other things, just not that. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo it. Now that's back, and so is this. And if we compare this with the other one that I practiced with earlier, let's see here. Close this, scroll over. Matching them up, they look pretty darn similar. This one might be a little bit more stretched. There is a slight difference. You might be wondering why this one is not as tall as this one. Notice where the y-axis ends. Excel usually likes to figure out a default for how tall the y-axis is. But if we want to stretch these bars a little higher, what we can do is we could go here, double click, and then bounds, where it says minimum, maximum. Let's say that maximum of 10 is actually too far away from where the data are. we'll just say we want it at 8 instead. So then it stretches everything up to ending this at 8. And then these graphs should look even more similar to each other, and they do. So that is what we're gunning for. All right. So that's complicated bar graphs. And you notice kind of how before I decided to shift everything where the time is the thing in the legend, the treatment's on the x-axis. That was a preference thing for how I wanted to demonstrate the data. You can kind of do it the other way around that the Excel program originally put things in. It's kind of up to you, but generally you just want to make sure whichever way you do it, it's a clear representation of the data. That's the important thing. In this case, we kind of see that something's going on in this drug and the accumbens control dose in the LH group where they eat a lot more than all the other groups. What's kind of interesting is that when we put the drug into the accumbens, it does elicit eating, but I mentioned how if we put the same drug into the lateral hypothalamus, it is known to suppress eating. And the text in this spreadsheet that you'll use does mention that again. So we do see that by stopping the hunger in the LH, it does suppress some of the eating that is normally coming from activating the accumbens in this case. Okay, so that's our complicated bar graph. We have something that's a little bit simpler. Now, before I get to that, let me just mention another thing about these error bar things. When we're looking at the original data from the publication, we can see that there are these asterisks here. And one thing that some people find helpful is that usually, if the standard error bars are far away from each other, let's say we compare this dark gray bar versus one of these down here, the T-whiskers are far away and not crossing with each other. And although this is not a guarantee, it's usually indicating that there's probably a significant difference between these things. Another thing to consider is that in publications, they don't just label all the possible significant differences, especially if they're not really important. So they don't put little symbols on every single thing, just on the things they want the reader to focus in on. All right. And the reason why we don't use standard deviation bars is that those are huge. They're stupidly huge. So they usually take up double the height of the standard error bars. Maybe not exactly that, but they are very wide. They stretch the graph out unnecessarily, and I don't find them particularly helpful. Not nearly as helpful as the more modest standard error bars. But again, preferences, differences in how the field works, etc. Not going to harp on that too much more. Last thing in Excel, scatterplots. Not just any scatterplot, but a good, informative scatterplot. So this is from another experiment that I did, where rats had stimulators put into the brain. Now, the stimulators weren't just on. The rats had to do something in order to turn those stimulators on. And where were these stimulators located? Well, they were in a reward center in the brain. So by stimulating the reward center, the rat would perceive it as rewarding and would continue to do that thing more, whatever it was. So there were two tests that I did in this general experiment. The first test was a sort of place preference paradigm, where every time they were in one side of a box, they would be receiving stimulation to this reward center. So being in that side of the box would be rewarding. Being the other side did nothing. Another test was where they had to do something a little bit more active. They had to keep on pushing a lever to get these 1 second bursts of stimulation to the brain region. And so we have down here a chart where it shows us the percent of the session's full time spent in the stimulation zone of that box. And then for the other test we did, the amount of time they lever pressed for that reward sensation in the brain. So we have amount of time in reward zone in the green, and then amount of effort applied for reward in yellow. And so my question was, okay, how well do these data match up? How well does one reward stimulation paradigm match up with the results of another reward stimulation paradigm? Well, we could figure out a simple correlation test on this, like Pearson's correlation coefficient, other things like that. But we also want to visualize. That's the whole point of this lab. So we're going to do a quick selection. We're going to select the titles, select the data. We're going to ignore this subject number again. That's just there for our own visualization purposes, not for any chart. We're going to go to insert. Instead of the bar chart, we're going to go for this one down here where it says insert scatter or bubble chart. We'll do the simple one here. That's just the dots for now. Because the lines, if you hover over it, the lines don't really make sense. They look like a crazy person was just connecting the dots into nothingness shapes. But just the dots for now. We'll notice that the title is kind of wrong here. If anything, that should be a title on one of the axes. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. In general, I'll just kind of call this relationship between stimulation tests. And as you know, we should have titles on the axes. So we'll do horizontal, we'll do vertical, we'll change those up. Where we could basically copy paste the stuff in here, I'm just going to select the text instead of the whole cell. So time spent, percent of time spent, that would be on the x-axis here. Hit enter, we're good. And then this one, select all the text, Control C, select all this, Control V, we're good. I'm just going to try to squish this down into 2 lines, make it a little bit better looking. All right, we're getting somewhere. I mentioned before how I don't really care for grid lines. We're just going to get rid of all of those grid lines. No one cares about that stuff. All right. Next, text sizing. We're going to just do that in bulk here. We're going to make all the text black, and maybe we can bump up the size of everything. Yes, we can. So that's all good. We could change the size of that a tiny bit. And then we could hit Control B to bold things if it's going to behave itself, that is. Come on, go away. Why is this here? Okay. My apologies. I think Excel's blocking a little bit. Yeah. Okay, starting to look good. We know that we want our lines to be looking a little bit better. Let's hit Control B to bold. That's the trick. Can't hit Control B in order to do that thing here. So let's just ignore that for a moment. All right, bold, bold. Right now. We'll try to put this centered in down at the bottom here. Looking good. Remember our tick marks. So we're going to put those in here. Tick marks, major, outside. You can kind of barely see them there. We're going to change the line to be a little bit more clear. Solid line, we're going to make it black instead of this light gray nonsense. Same here. Tick marks. We're going to do minor type again in this case. Oh, that's what happens when it's facing inside. Not so helpful. We're going to do major type outside. Now it's pointing at the numbers. You might also notice, the fact that this line is crossing straight in the middle of the graph, it's kind of annoying. There's stuff that's kind of hidden here. How can we fix that? Well, there is a setting for that. It's actually gotten by clicking the y-axis instead of the x-axis. So let's click on this, and you should get an option in axis options. Horizontal crosses, and you can put in a custom value. We're going to say the horizontal, the x-axis, crosses with the y-axis that we have selected right now at -500, because that's where this dash mark is here. So we hit enter. That looks better. That's a lot better. Okay, and then each of these dots represents one subject and their responses in each test. So in this subject's case, they had almost no response on the stimulation task for the lever pressing. So that's 0 here. And the amount of time that they spent on the x-axis, that is close to 0. We could kind of figure out who it might be. It's probably this subject number 7 here. So that's probably what this dot here corresponds to. If we hover over it, we actually see the same data as the cell that I'm selecting here and the cell right next to it. So that kind of cues us in that we have things arranged in the right way. Our correlation chart doesn't look super complete though. We should add one more thing. Now these aren't average data. These are still raw data, because if we wanted to figure out averages, then we would just get 2 mean numbers and then we'd be done. That would create our bar chart again. But we want to show relationship. So we go back to clicking on our chart here, go to design, add chart element, trend line. We're going to just do a regular linear trend line. And we can double click on that trend line. You can change how that looks. You can do something that instead of doing a dotted thing, we'll do something that's more solid. Let's see. So we'll do solid line, and then we have to do something that's not dashed. So we can do something like that. So that looks pretty clear right there. It stands out very well to us. And then as for the number, well, we have trend line options. It says linear, and you can actually have it display not only the equation, the linear equation for that, but also the r² value. And r, not squared, is the correlation coefficient that tells us how related this stuff is. We're just going to move these guys up here out of the way, but still using the space of the chart rather than shoving it off to the side anywhere. Now, the final test. Let's see how this matches up to the one I made earlier, alone. All right, so we're going to just shrink that down, zoom it in a little bit. Again, you kind of see how it's a little grainy from the fact that I put it through an image program, but we're good there. Pull this over here, shrink that down, move it over. And we see that these two things are practically identical. Let me shift that over. Yes. So they're looking really, really similar, if not identical here. And that's a good sign that we've been doing things correctly. All right. So that about ends my tutorial for stuff that you do exclusively within Excel. What you guys will be receiving are, of course, the blank versions of these to kind of redo all this stuff. But the whole purpose was to kind of walk through and try this out. And if you need to go back through, you can pause or rewind as you need to. That said, once you're done with trying to replicate and graph things very similarly to how I did, then I suggest that you move on to learning about the image editing tool called GIMP. That will be in the next video. Till then, see you.